You are tuned to Cafe Cabaret. My name is Francis DiMenno. Portions of tonight's special presentation were shot before a live audience at the Middle East Cafe, located at 472 Massachusetts Avenue, Cambridge. Tonight, The Wrong Hero interprets the thought of conservative icon Lush Rambo in a presentation entitled The Way Things Ain't.
Ladies and gentlemen, The Wrong Hero.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Today we're going to do something very special in this half hour. Well, first I should tell you, I'm the Wrong Hero, and I hope you're all prosperous, well-fed white men wearing business suits and ties, or at least wearing a white shirt and a tie, or I hope at the very least you're prosperous, because my good friend Lush Rambo wanted to do this show today, but he couldn't, and so I'm going to be doing some readings from his book, and I'm going to call it The Way Things Ain't. And so, in the interest of interpreting the thoughts of my good friend Lush Rambo, I'm going to read from my book called The Way Things Ain't, or did I just say that? Anyway, okay. First of all, I have to acknowledge who I owe all this to. I owe most of this presentation. I wrote most of this presentation on the backs of candy wrappers, and I'd like to thank the Hershey Chocolate Company, the Mars Candy Corporation, and the Necco Wafer Factory, without whom I couldn't make it through the night. Also, I would like to thank Father Charles Coughlin, whose speeches, writings, and pronouncements have proven a boon and an inspiration to me. Most of all, I'd like to thank the ordinary Joes out there, as well as all the extraordinary Joes. For example, Joe McCarthy, whose speeches, writings, and collected sayings I have studied for many years. Now, this is my warning to you. I don't have messianic delusions, but they're trying to crucify me. At least that's what God told me. Anyway, I hope my humble effort to inform you about the way things ain't is received in the spirit in which it is presented, whatever the hell that means. I would like to mention that in the course of clarifying the thought of a true conservative, I have put on 35 pounds in the last 6 weeks. Now, I hope you appreciate what a great sacrifice this has entailed, especially since I have 55 more pounds to go if I really want to look like a true conservative. Additionally, I should warn you that the following program is insipid and in no way threatens the status quo. The liberals will not review it, and the conservatives have already memorized it by heart. Now, this is chapter 1 of my book, that is, entitled The Way Things Ain't, but that's not the chapter title of chapter 1.
Oh, sure. Bet.
The chapter title of chapter 1 is, I Figured I'd Cash In. Now, here's how it goes. I figured I'd cash in on my enormous fame by putting together this here TV show based on my best-selling book, based on my TV show, based on my radio show. But then I decided that many of you are too foolish to follow my sophisticated line of socio-political reasoning and economic reasoning, and besides, events move far too rapidly for mere mortals to comprehend them, unless, of course, they happen to be me, Lush Rambo. Now, to express this thought in basic terms, even a child or a liberal could understand. Here today, gone tomorrow. But surely you must agree that because I'm so great, anything I have to say is worthwhile and worth listening to, even if you can't even understand a single thing I'm talking about. Yes, That's right, it's me, your friend, Lush Rambo. And again, I see that there's a very prosperous-looking man in a white shirt wearing a tie. I don't approve of your jacket, sir. It looks like it's leather, and the liberals will be after me because you killed a cow in order to purchase that jacket. But come on in, please, and have a seat as I continue my presentation of the way things ain't. So, what do I believe, you may be asking yourself, although I believe I'm giving you more credit for an intelligent spirit of inquiry than you actually possess. Well, I'll tell you what I believe. I believe that the right of the individual to be heard, just so long as that individual has his own radio show, newsletter, television show, or a printing press, or preferably all four, such as me, Lush Rambo has. I believe in the individual just so long as there's enough of a goon squad out there to push him or her around when he or she says something that I don't agree with. Now, for instance, when the individual plays loud radios in public places that don't carry my program, or scrawls graffiti on public property which doesn't mention me, Lush Rambo, then I get very, very upset. Because, of course, they're liberals. I believe that social justice cannot be achieved by big government giving money to people other than myself, Lush Rambo. I believe that the way to get money is by being a cheerleader for the side that's already won. And that goes something like this. Hooray for our side! Go us! Anyway, where was I anyway? Oh yes, I believe we are cheerleaders for the side that is already won by afflicting the afflicted and comforting the comfortable, because they're the ones who have all the money, of course. I believe in living on a fat line. Okay. I believe in preaching to the faithful in the choir, okay, because, well, they don't heckle, basically. Oh, sorry, I thought this was a snack. I almost swallowed it. I'd like to illustrate my point by relating a little fable, and I think I'm going to stand for this one, only because it gets monotonous watching a fat man sitting behind a desk for half an hour, or maybe I'll squat, like that. Once upon a time, I was sad because I had no shoes. Then I met a man who had no feet, so I let him walk all over me. And that, my friends, that, folks, is called affirmative action. And then I met a man who had no feet, and so I kicked him hard. And I said, excuse me. And that, my friends, that is a return to family values. I hope you enjoyed my little anecdote, because that's what I believe in. And it's also what you believe, unless you're a few pickles short of a barrel, as they used to say up in Missouri, which is where I'm from, and which is why I have this stammer, because I believe it was 2 days ago, it was Ronald Reagan's birthday. Let's all have a big cheer for... Well, anyway, okay, enough of that. Who cares about him, right? I mean, I'm the conservative now. He doesn't do anything anymore. I believe that anybody who doesn't watch my show probably goes to a church run by secular humanists. They probably read a profitable newspaper or magazine run by anti-capitalists. They do not brush their teeth. They shoot crap. They drink from the toilet bowl, and even now they're probably plotting to put atheistic socialism in our drinking water, my friends, because they are not keeping themselves busy by listening to my show. Now, I would like to discuss for a moment how, while I was legitimately getting out of serving our country in Vietnam because I have a flat back and lower pain. The drought-dodging hippies in the liberal news media were off smoking LSD on a hog farm somewhere and dressing their children in earth shoes and unisex clothing and reading them to sleep each night with selections from Das Kapital, the Communist Manifesto, and the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution. Now, I would like very much to discuss this because, but I can't because such a scurrilous and hypocritical attack upon the liberal news media would be beneath the dignity of a man who has dined with prime ministers such as Margaret Thatcher and other cabinet officials, and has had presidents carry his luggage into the Lincoln Room, and who has been named the winner of the Well-Mannered Award for the last 2 years in a row. So I will not indulge in these scurrilous attacks upon the liberal news media or our liberal ruling officials at this time. I'll tell you more of what I believe. I believe I represent the big anger in this country. I represent the big anger in this country, but I despise you too much to talk about it very much. I believe that not brute force, but thoughtful reflection and judgment are essential to a well-rounded life. And I'll smash any D-hunk who says different. I am aware that other nations think our violence is insane. I say, who cares what they think, huh? Kill them all. Because it's people like that I would like to kill. The hostile nations. I believe that I not only have a huge head and a tiny inhibitory forebrain, but that I am the big man on hippocampus. Now, some people have referred to me as a hippo. I don't think they were referring to that fact, but anyway. That was disgusting, but you will remember it. I believe that one person can have an impact day after day, and I don't care if in the course of fighting the good fight I should fall, but you should care, especially if I fall on you. Now, I believe that that even though I have a deeply conservative soul, I also have a rock and roll heart. And if I have time, I will take it out of its box and show it to you. I believe that the world wants polarization. So I figure I might as well sell it polar water and make a cool bundle in the bargain. I believe that writing a book, such as I have just done right here. I believe that writing a book is hard work. In fact, it is back-breaking work, and it involves 18 hours of hard labor, 18 hours a day, and I wouldn't blame you if you didn't decide to do it, because I decided not to do it either. I just had somebody else do all the hard work, and I didn't pay them very much either, by the way. Okay, winding down. Oh, first though, this word, we have to have a word from our sponsors. And you know, sponsors really like me because the people who watch my show are very loyal. And this word for hogwash. Do you, like most Americans, have a 300-pound pet pig in your basement? Well, if you do, you can't do better than to freshen up their breath when company comes around by giving them hogwash. Hogwash. It fights gingivitis below the gum line because, you know, pigs eat 24 hours a day and they never have time to brush their teeth. So be sure the next time you're loading up their trough to put in some hogwash. It's good. Anyway, back to my show. I believe that he who laughs last is sitting there laughing while there's important work to be done and lots of money to be made. And I intend to be the one who does it. Makes the money, that is. So keep laughing, and if you can't laugh for the sake of laughter, then laugh for the sake and the thought that somebody is laughing at you. Mainly me, because I got mine. Hi, I'm Lush Rambo, and this presentation is called The Way Things Ain't. Now, remember, if the liberals plunge us into another depression, that will be good news for all of us conservatives, because that will mean that we can buy property and slaves at rock bottom prices. Okay, my friends? So remember that. Be optimistic and take heart that if the liberals put us in a crash land, that we'll come out on top all the same. And remember, if you're mad about something, don't write an ungrammatical letter to the editor of your local newspaper, because people will think you're a crackpot. No, listen to me in the privacy of your own home, and or in sleazy taverns and bowling alleys with a bunch of like-minded individuals, and nobody will ever know what a crackpot you really are. Now, believe me, I'm not one of those crazy people who goes to the public library and reads the unabridged dictionary and giggles. No, I've got my own unabridged dictionary right at home in my own library. And if I let out a chuckle every now and then, well, nobody is the wiser. Because there's a lot of stuff that I try to keep hidden from you people. Actually, what I really believe in is impulse, immediate gratification, and throwing tantrums in the face of, excuse me, I feel a burp coming on. Not yet. Okay. I'll have some of this hogwash. It's very good. Remember, if you have a pig at home, hogwash. Man, this stuff is good. All right, now oh yeah. Throwing tantrums in the face of minor obstacles, and in that way, I truly epitomize the American people. Because I believe that the dismantling of social controls leads to barbarism, and I'm against it. Unless, of course, social controls are dismantled because I have exported my adherents into a blind frenzy. That's called democracy in action. And so, to conclude this chapter, I would like to remind you that these are not my opinions or anybody else's, but that too will soon change once I get my worldwide brainwashing apparatus set up. Well, folks, I see that we're just about running out of time here on the Lush Rambo show. So, there's that burp. There, that's good. Now, I think I can't go, I have low blood sugar, so I can't go more than 20 minutes without having a steak, a hot dog, a box of popcorn, a diet soda, and a salad bar. So I must go now, but please tune in for our next presentation of the Lush Rambo Show. Thank you.
Hi, I'm the Wrong Hero, and I'm back with more readings from Lush Rambo's book, The Way Things Ain't. Now, this is chapter 2, and it's called, How Did I Get to Be So Great? How did I get to be so great? First, let me talk about New York. Don't get the idea that I hate New York. New York City is hell, but at least all of your friends are there. But it sure was a long way from sucking down pizza burgers in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, to moving to New York City. But I love New York City. I love not having to drive a car. I love not having to try to fit into a car. I love having things delivered to my door. I love not having to squeeze through a door. I love the restaurants and the cultural life. Wait a minute. Who the hell am I kidding? I don't give two hoots about the cultural life. I love having whole restaurants delivered to my door. New York is hard, but life is full of things you don't want to do, like stopping to take a breath in the middle of supper, for example. I had a lot of setbacks when I was first launching my career. Did I face them like a man by abjectly apologizing to the people who I offended? Or did I squirm my way out of trouble by saying that due to a systems error beyond my control, I was forced to make a miscalculation because I was not presented with all the relevant facts like I told I would be, and besides, the liberal big media, allied with self-serving pressure groups, compassion fascists, commie libs, the arts and croissants crowd, homeless advocates, and multiculturalists are out to censor me. Well, of course I did that. What do you expect? Now, this is chapter 3, and it's called Why I Am So Successful. Why am I so successful at what I do? The answer is simple. Liberals lie and frown, and for a long time, they had us doing it. But then conservatives like me finally realized that you have to smile and kill. I don't mean that literally, but only in the sense of entertainment. Or do I? The way I keep you guessing is just a small part of what I am forced to modestly concede is my immense charm. The problem with most irony is, by the time most people figure it out, they're sick and tired of it. It was part of my great genius to figure out that there was a whole untapped market of alcoholic World War II veterans who were finally sick of listening to big band jazz on their push-button AM car radios every day from noon until 3 o'clock. They wanted to hear a person with a young man's energy and an old man's thoroughly jaundiced point of view. Someone with that magic blend of extremism, bloated self-satisfaction, and world-weary cynicism who could also sell stuff and keep the advertisers happy. And that's gravy. And of course, I love gravy, and so do the advertisers. Somebody like me who could think and talk like their fathers and put a smile on their face in the bargain. Do I dare suggest that that little old someone is me? Was there any doubt in your mind ever? Do you actually think I would waste my valuable time talking about some other less talented person? Do you think I got to where I am today by caring about what other people think? Do you really believe that the people who call my show serve any purpose whatsoever other than that of repeating back what I just said? I don't tell people what to think, but if they don't think like me, they have no business calling my show and telling me what they think. Because I do the thinking around here, and it's hard work. And hard work never hurt anyone. And it's a lot better than being in the army or jail. For that matter, it's a lot better than selling potato chips in Liberty, Missouri for a measly 35 grand a year. Because as of right now, I make 35 grand a day. And I still get to eat all the potato chips I want. And not only that, but I can hobnob with bigwigs by paying them to give speeches at my events, which I videotape and sell for $24.95, not including shipping and handling. And if they turn around and decide to interview me in distinguished journals like Policy Review or the Reader's Digest or this fine magazine, Human Events, well, that's okay, you know. And if they decide to call me our greatest living American, and if they eventually, when they become president, even decide to do something about eliminating the capital gains tax, well, I say it's one back scratches the other, and that's the American way. Always has been. Make no mistake about it. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. It. But seriously, most ordinary, decent, hard-working Americans live on a wing and a prayer. And it's my job to make sure that that wing is the right wing. And I pray everybody listens to my show. Chapter 4. Spoon-fed by the liberal media. I don't believe people should be spoon-fed by the liberal media. That's why I keep a gold-plated shovel handy. Because even though I tell people I'll do their thinking for them, what I really want them to do is think for themselves. But they always do the exact opposite of what I expect, so I still end up doing their thinking for them anyway. Now, a lot of people wonder where I got the idea of news updates. Well, in fact, it's an idea as old as the concept of filler. Still more people ask, how's come I play music on the show? Friends, believe me when I tell you that I've been in this business 25 years, and for half that time, I was a rock and roll DJ, and I always thought that what I've had to say was at least 10 times more interesting than some pinko rock song. And now I have my revenge. I chatter, and the music is the filler, instead of the other way around. My station manager liked to call it breaking up the monotony. Rest assured, that man has, since that time, been demoted to fetching my breakfasts. I'm sick of people telling us we should imitate the poor and feel sorry for them. Who cares if that's what Jesus said? Folks, I may believe in God, but that doesn't mean I waste my time going to church. And neither should you. Not when I've just written another book, which you haven't read yet. That'll be on next week. Instead of all this nonsense about imitating the poor, I say we imitate the rich. Clog our nation's sewers with Evian water bottles. Litter the streets with Dove Bar wrappers. Drive down the highway in your sports car at 120 miles an hour, blasting classical music from your quadraphonic Blaupunkt speakers. And when an officer of the law pulls you over to ask you why you're going so fast, say to him, "Excuse me, officer, but why aren't you out there arresting poor people?" And slip him a $100 bill and send him on his way. I hope you realize that I meant everything I just said, except that part about bribing an officer of the law with a $100 bill. No, give it to him in singles with non-consecutive serial numbers, and by the time he's finished counting it, you'll be in the next county. My facetious remarks have a serious point. The wealthy and the middle class should protect their slices of the federal pie. But it's okay to share some of the crust with a working and winking government official. I believe we must attack the absurd by making utterly unsupportable allegations which stigmatize entire groups on the basis of a few individuals. Because, my friends, that's the American way. And folks, I believe in 5 facts. Number 1, I am 99 44/100% pure. Number 2, I reach 99.82% of the viewing population. Number 3, my temperature is usually 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, none of this communist Celsius or centigrade. Number 4, there are usually 365 days in a year. And number 5, I still put my pants on one leg at a time. Usually. Thank you. And now, Chapter 5 of The Way Things Ain't. I'm mad and I'm angry too. Now, back in 1991, I let you all know how sick and tired and mad and angry and ill at ease and exhausted I was about a lot of stuff on the TV.
Now here's the speech I gave. That people are homeless is not my fault. Okay, so maybe I take up 2 spaces on public transit. But I'm a New Yorker now. I ride in cabs. That people have AIDS is not my fault. I will never have AIDS. I will probably never have sex. I'm tired of hearing that 1491 was the last good year for the Indian. Columbus was some Italian guy, and I'm of German and Dutch extraction, so don't blame me. Where would we be if Columbus took venereal disease and smallpox back from the Indians, and put all the gold back where he found it, and sailed the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria backwards, back to where he came from? I'll bet all those students at Stanford and other elite institutions wish that were the case. Well, you can wish in one hand and spit in the other, and see which one gets filled up first. Even though I'm wealthy beyond the dreams of avarice, I speak for the middle class, and plenty of them are ready to stick up for me, even though there is nothing in it for them. Why should we pay Russia to dismantle their nukes? Drop a few big ones and get the job done at no extra cost to ourselves. Plus, we won't have to feed them anymore, which translates into more caviar for me. The people I talk to, both of them, are sick of being besieged by taxes. They're resentful of welfare. They're not tired of the home mortgage interest deduction, though, and neither am I. What hard-working, middle-class taxpayers need is more government handouts. They are angry at being ignored. They want revenge. They want to nod their heads in time to my egomania. They want to listen to me, the expert, Lush Rambo. I've been practicing my radio voice for 40 years. I have all the prejudices of the common man, and I'm an expert at reaffirming them every day. I'm an expert at stirring up trouble. I'm an expert at polarizing an audience. I'm an expert at selling myself. For I have reinvented AM radio, and in the process have invented a new art form. If you consider ranting an art form. I believe that poverty and suffering are due, not to the unequal distribution of goods and services, but to the unequal distribution of greed. If everyone in the world were as avaricious as me, my work would be done, and I could stay at home and not bother getting dressed and have them hook me up to a drip tube full of Crown Royal and listen to my radio shows while reading my own books, which is what I like to do anyway. I say, quit catering to pinko weirdos who don't fit in with the mainstream and start farting on an ultra-conservative sociopath who lives like a degenerate monk in his upper crust warren off on the west side of Manhattan. Sincerely, me, Lush Rambo. Well, I hope you liked that little speech, because my next chapter is about a controversial subject. And that subject is the subject of Chapter 6. And Chapter 6 is entitled, Abortion is a Controversial Subject. Abortion is a controversial subject. It has never been a problem for me personally, because I'm ill at ease with women and have no energy for relationships. But on the issue of abortion, I choose not to wallow in cheap sentiment, now that I'm affluent enough to be able to afford the expensive kind. Oh. I would just like to say that
in much the same way as I raised AM radio from the dead, I would like to smother Roe versus Wade in its crib. Because I'm not just pro-life, I'm anti-death. Except, of course, when it comes to grown men on death row, none of whom represent a market for my books, newsletters, or videotapes. Instead, I believe we should reach out to America's silent majority, the unborn. I reach out my hand to those innocents who are yet to be born, for they represent a broad new potential market to exploit for my personal gain. Now, I could cite percentages from a recent survey or indulge in the type of specious reductio ad absurdum arguments they warned us against in speech class, utilizing spurious comparisons and preposterous what-if logic. But most of my adherents are far too sophisticated to fall for these first-year high school debating team ruses. They prefer bald-faced lies. And besides, if abortion had been widely available before Roe versus Wade, I probably wouldn't have those over 20 million listeners. You probably wouldn't be able to read this book, and I probably would be working in marketing or selling watchtowers door to door. Now, I don't often agree with well-known liberals unless they go along with me on certain issues. Nor do I blindly follow the lead of conservative jurists unless their pronouncements advance my agenda. And I don't often bring up the topic of eugenics unless I can wave it around as a straw man to shoot full of holes, in the process equating it with abortion, legalized drugs, and the right to die movement. I wouldn't have aborted Beethoven or Charles Dickens or myself. I wouldn't take my grandmother off life support or myself. Rather than rely upon abortion for birth control, we should prevent the pregnancy from ever happening. But not by handing out condoms to school-age children. Condoms are bad. I know from personal experience. I still remember the time I couldn't get one on myself. Well, now we're up to chapter 7. The 80s were great. The 80s were great. I got to keep most of my hard-earned money instead of throwing it at school teachers, librarians, firemen, and police officers. Tax-deductible donations to charity went up during the 80s, so I don't know how people can say the 1980s were a decade of greed. A decade of lower marginal tax rates and tax deductions out the wazoo is more like it, but that's too big a mouthful for most people to say in one breath, unless, of course, they have a rather large lung capacity. The 70s were lousy. The 80s were wonderful. Inflation went down, the rich actually paid more taxes, and the deficit doesn't support my argument, so I won't mention it. Lyndon Johnson couldn't have guns and butter because he was a liberal and he spread misery, but Ronald Reagan could have guns, butter, and a lower margarine tax rate. Sorry, marginal tax rate, because he was a conservative. My stomach is growling. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, when you give money to people, you're actually making them into slaves. I am not a slave to government handouts. I haven't left my room in 3 days, but I'm not a slave. Abraham Lincoln didn't depend on government handouts for his education. And if I remember correctly, he actually freed the slaves. And he was a Republican. So remember that the next time somebody tries to tell you that the Republicans are greedy. Besides, liberals are greedy too. Why would they pretend otherwise in a society that values money above all else is beyond me. Maybe it's something in the food they eat. I am not an intellectual, but I know what irony is. And just because the ideas I propagate on the air are designed to appeal to a bunch of people who have money to throw not at do-good social programs, but at me, does not mean that I don't really mean what I say, even though I am being ironic a lot of the time. Or is that sarcastic? I didn't pay much attention when that distinction came up in college. Anyway, just because I make a lot of money doesn't mean I can be bought. They don't have to pay me to have these complacent opinions. I came up with them on my own, thanks to a boyhood spent in a town where Norman Rockwell was regarded as a Stalinist. Folks, I was poor once. Keeping a man like me in snacks is a tough business. For a long time, I was actually a member of the middle class. So I know how tough it is to stay afloat. Actually, since my body is 45% fat, it wasn't all that tough for me. Except I have no strength in my upper arms, so I had to do a lot of kicking, which was excellent training for the job I have now. But how can the rich people float if you tax their yachts? A lot of people who build those boats end up losing their jobs and they drown. So the next time somebody wants to slap a tax on your sailboat, tell them you're going down for the third time, and if you drown, you can't buy the goods and services that make this country great and which give people the disposable income to throw at incredibly well-to-do people like me. And that would be a pretty how do you do if, instead of me getting all that money, it went to a bunch of widows and orphans who don't even know how to swim, let alone charter a cruise ship to sail to Cuba, so me and a bunch of my pals can give Fidel Castro the raspberry. Chapter 8. AIDS is not a problem for me. AIDS is not a problem for me, nor should it be for you, if you listen to my show instead of wasting your time falling in love or being intimate with a member of the opposite sex. And people who believe otherwise deserve everything they get. I tried to help, but I never got a chance to talk to anybody. I guess the Pediatric AIDS Foundation doesn't need a 270-pound poster boy. And yet people accuse me of not caring. Maybe it was that crack I made about Magic Johnson. But that shouldn't have anything to do with it. So what if he raised a lot of money for AIDS? I don't like homosexuals. But I never said I hated them. Just the liberal ones. But all that should be in the past, regardless of what I feel now. Whatever that means. But let me talk about another charity. I don't care about AIDS anyway. But I do feel guilty that I never went to war. People might accuse me of being a peacenik. So I figured I'd support the Marine Corps Scholarship Fund. Because it's better to help the children of soldiers than to help kids who have some exotic disease, and it's more in line with my politics anyway. But I still want you to think that I want to help fight AIDS, so I'm going to slip a little note in here that you can send your money to the Pediatric AIDS Foundation, I guess, if you feel like it. Oh, I'm glad that's over with. I don't like talking about this sort of thing. So now, Chapter 9. Congress does nothing for me. Congress does nothing for me. I don't get a free checking account, and that's a real scandal. If I wrote a bad check, I'd be thrown in jail. Not that there's any penitentiary in the fruited plain big enough to hold me. The point is, I can't write checks for money I don't have. I can take credit for ideas I don't have. I can even write an entire book without so much as an index or bibliography. But most good-hearted people don't care about that stuff. Just Democrats and other partisan scum. Anyway, nobody is going to disagree with me on this issue, so I could go on for hours. And I probably will. The fact of the matter is, most politicians are out of touch with the people they are sworn to serve. Of course, I should talk. I can't even touch my own feet. In fact, I haven't even seen them since about 1988. Some people call me a bomb thrower. It's true that I believe in having plenty of ammunition. But that's because ammunition is just a fancy way of saying ammo. And ammo is Latin for love. And I love to drop these little bombshells on Congress. In fact, I made a career out of doing just that. Folks, what gets me is Congress thinks we're stupid. They're the stupid ones. There is nothing hypocritical about my hatred for democracy. And I hope you agree. I believe that when individuals pressure the Congress, that is a lobby. But when I pressure the Congress, I represent a community. And that gives me clout. The kind of clout conservatives don't have, because they can't get elected to Congress because their district will lose their seniority, which means they won't get those pork barrel projects, which I'm foursquare against unless conservatives control them, which they can't because they can't get elected. And it's all the fault of those liberals and the gridlock they cause because they represent the voters in their district instead of the country as a whole, even though they also do stuff like influence foreign policy, which I'm also against, even though that makes my circular arguments come across as illogical. Anyway, that's why we have gridlock. But I don't care, because I live within walking distance of my office, even though I always take a cab. Even with all that gridlock floating around. Ironic, huh? Chapter 10. Animals do not listen to my show. People are always moaning about the rights of animals, but animals do not listen to my show. Animals do not care about what I have to say. Animals are like liberals. They hardly ever bathe. They'll accept any handout you give them, and not one of them voted for Ronald Reagan. Actually, I didn't vote for him either, but that was because I was too busy to register to vote until 1986. Anyway, like liberals, animals have no rights I am bound to respect, except the right to be eaten, especially by me. And believe me, I've depopulated the equivalent of several zoos in the course of my career as a gourmand. But I don't hate animals. Far from it. I love animals. Especially with gravy. Animals don't have rights. How can they? They can't even talk. If they could host their own show. But they probably wouldn't. Parrots can talk, but all they can do is repeat back what their owners tell them to say. I'm different. I say what I want. And if it happens to coincide with what people want to hear, that's the icing on the cake. Only a moron would say otherwise. But at least a moron can talk. And the devil can quote scripture for his own ends. And that's in the Bible. Or maybe William Shakespeare said that. But he was probably a secular humanist who believed in the theory of evolution. Animals don't make money. Only humans can do that. Sure, animals can build stuff, but so what? They don't have a distribution network. So we can just come along and take their stuff. And what are they going to say about it? Nothing. Unless they're a parrot. Then we can teach them to say, sure, go ahead and take it, it's on the house. But parrots don't build stuff anyway. All they can do is testify in court. But they can't write books like me. And if they could write books, what would they call their book? Pieces of Eight, My Life on the Spanish Main, by Polly. You won't get 5 million people to buy that one. Not unless you jazzed it up with some sex stuff. But that would be secular humanism, and I'm not buying it. My dog doesn't understand me. Neither of my 2 wives understood me either. But they all respect me because I'm a human, and maybe I'm not good at small talk, but I can say fetch and play dead with the best of them because I'm human. I say, if you must interact with animals, be kind to them and then eat them. In other words, if you must kill them, do so responsibly. In other words, don't kill them all. Leave some for me. Some people say elephants knock stuff over and eat and drink all the food and water in sight. Some people say that about me. But in my case, it's not true. But some people still say it's open season on me, Lush Rambo. But I can hire a lawyer and a bodyguard, but animals can't, so there. All animals can do is hope somebody puts them on a ranch so they can be killed responsibly, one by one, instead of being slaughtered in a bunch. Now, that doesn't mean that some wise guy should raise cute little dogs for food. I used to own a dog. Don't you say a word against my dog. My dog was a good dog. My dog tasted like veal. Dolphins are lousy lovers. So am I. But I have a multimedia empire. And why do people care whether we eat dolphins? Dolphins are smart. And you are what you eat. And who wants to eat some stupid gasping tuna? I say, give me my dolphin meat! Besides, if dolphins are so smart, how's come the only time you ever see them up close is in a cage? Answer me that, Mr. Animal Rights Smarty. And how's about shrimp? Nobody cares if we eat them. Maybe it's because they're called shrimp. And people think they can push them around. Well, if we called them giant, maybe people would give them the same respect that they give to me, Lush Rambo. Anyway, to sum up, if people want to live in caves, fine. But I'll be in my penthouse eating dolphin meat and laughing at them like God says we should. Chapter 11. I found my thrill on Anita Hill. I got a large charge out of the way Judge Thomas was minding his own business when all of a sudden Anita Hill comes around and there was all this sex business and that makes me kind of queasy because conservative public officials deserve the right to privacy even if it means committing so-called crimes, but just so long as they do it in the privacy of their own chambers, who cares? Anyway, I think feminists are like butter. They're soft they're yellow, and when the heat is on, they run. Or is it melt? Either way, I know this makes no sense, but neither does feminism. Any red-blooded female can deal with sexual harassment on her own terms, without snitching on the boss. I have never witnessed anything as despicable as the Anita Hill affair, except maybe the time I was on my first honeymoon and I realized, too late, that the hotel had a mirror on the ceiling. Anyway, they tried to destroy Clarence Thomas through unsubstantiated innuendo, and let me tell you, I've done this enough on more than a few occasions, and it's a dirty, low-down trick. Folks, why do civil rights groups have so much power? They appeal to class hatred. I do the opposite. I love the upper class. I do everything I can for them. Maybe these civil rights groups should try that. Hey, it works for me. Civil rights leaders are basically a bunch of money-grubbing pinkos. Even though communism is a dead issue, most of my audience doesn't seem to realize it, so it's time to put that unsubstantiated innuendo to work for me. Because look at what they did to Clarence Thomas! They almost put him out of business. And that, folks, would have been bad for business. Or maybe you think we ought to have feminists and communists in the Senate. Well, we already have liberals, and that's pretty much the same thing, and look what a mess they made of it. Maybe next they'll be wanting to elect Mike Tyson to the Senate. After all, he doesn't respect beauty pageant contestants, so he must be pretty liberal. But at least he didn't try to ruin Clarence Thomas. Maybe next time Mike Tyson should ask Anita Hill for a date. Then we'll see justice done. Chapter 12. Why should kids get condoms? Why should kids get condoms? I didn't even know how to neck until I watched somebody doing it from the back seat of a car. When the kids played spin the bottle, I was the one the girls didn't want to kiss. These kids think if they use condoms, they'll be part of a fast crowd. Well, I was never part of that fast crowd. As a matter of fact, I still live like a monk, except I have money to burn. I smoke Ashton Jamaican leaf cigars. No more White Owls for me. And it's all because I took all that counterculture stuff and made a career out of being against it. And as far as I'm concerned, kids shouldn't be lectured on safe sex. They should have no sex, just like me. Because you can't die from having no sex. At least, not physically. Emotionally, maybe. But then you can turn your talents to something useful, like getting a job. If you pull a 70-hour week, you're too tired to do much of anything else, let alone stay up all night making a woman happy. Take it from me. Having no sex works. And I should know. I've had a lot of experience at it. And believe me when I say that there is strength in numbness. Besides, condoms break. Or so I'm told. I don't even masturbate anymore. I guess some folks just aren't cut out for sex. I wish I could say the same for these kids today. Chapter 13. Why can't a man be a man? Why can't a man be a man like they used to be back in 1957, which was the happiest year of my life, even though I was only 6 years old? Those were the days when men were men and women weren't. These days, women want to have it both ways. They want to use the men's room, but they complain because we leave the toilet seat up. And then they have the nerve to claim harassment. Who needs them anyway? I'm going to stand up right now, just like I did in 1957, and say this on behalf of all men everywhere. Who needs icky girls? They're nothing but trouble. They can't throw, they can't cuss, they can't whistle, they won't spit, and they don't even collect baseball cards. And for that matter, they don't even know the difference between a Ford and a Chevy. And I knew that back when I was 2.5 years old. Now, if they would just stay to themselves and play house and dolls and other girl games, then everybody would be a whole lot better off. Girls aren't going to change things by getting into boys' stuff. Now, I'm not trying to be offensive. I am being offensive. So what? If you don't like it, go back to your easy bake ovens and Susie homemakers and leave me alone to build model airplanes and play with toy trucks. And if you're good, then maybe I'll let you watch me build something with my erector set. Because I believe there are certain undeniable differences between me and a woman. Women have big bellies too, but usually it means they're pregnant. Chapter 14. Replace the American eagle with the pot-bellied pig. I say we should replace the American eagle with the pot-bellied pig. And I don't mean me. I mean a cute little porker that eats all day without coming up for air and likes to root around in other people's trash. That might sound like a lot like me, but it isn't. Nobody ever said that I was little. Sure, my dad had a piece of a radio station, KMGO, and he helped me get my start in showbiz. Sure, that nice doctor told me that I wouldn't have to fight in Vietnam. Okay, so I swiped a lot of stuff from a bunch of DJs off in Chicago who nobody's ever heard of. But there's a lot of things that weren't handed to me on a silver platter. Like a social life. Or a decent haircut. Or an attractive necktie. I had to make it without a lot of that stuff. But at least in my school, they let us pray to God. That's because my folks had the sense to let some invisible deity scare me into doing the stuff I was supposed to do. If they had counted on the government to do the job instead, I might have ended up like what's-his-name who has that radio show off in New York City. I'm not going to say his name, but he's this like long-haired guy. You can bet no one's going to mistake me for him anytime soon, because unlike him, I took full advantage of the few opportunities that came my way. Anyway, if you see a sparkle in my eye, remember, it is the gleam in the eye of an eager hog overlooking the brimming trough of opportunity that this great land has to offer. And now I'm going to take a break, and I'll be right back with more of The Way Things Ain't by Lush Rambo. I'm the wrong hero. Hi, I'm back. It's me, Lush Rambo, finishing up my presentation of The Way Things Ain't. I thank the wrong hero for reading this to me, by the way. Hi, I'm the wrong hero. I just had Lush, read this for me. I can't. I'm too tired. Anyway, this is chapter 15. It's called
The Earth is a big place. The Earth is a big place. Too big for it to have come out of some little bug. Too big for man to destroy. Even if the man in question has his clothing tailored by Omar the tent maker. I think God made the world. At the very least, I know he made me. Nobody else would have been fit to tackle such a gigantic job. And that's why it annoys me when I hear some stupid PhD with a doctorate in biology try to pull that creationist jazz. There's still some things science doesn't understand, like how's come I don't fall through the sidewalk every time I walk down the street? Anyway, if there is no God, then how's come there's so many tasty things to eat, and how's come hot food is hot and cold food is cold? Answer me that, Mr. Darwin. The way I see it, just because God made man, we have just as much right to be here as some stupid tree or owl or iceberg. Man is not some kind of disease. Man is actually a farm animal, and God is Mr. Old MacDonald. Only, when's the last time you saw a cow that could blow up the whole shooting match with just a flick of the wrist? And yet, some people say there's no such thing as progress. We could blow up the whole shebang and still have an ozone layer, yet the namby-pambies and Save the Earth sob sisters continue to cry wolf. Anyway, you don't see rich people throwing their trash everywhere. It's always poor people you see hauling their junk off to the town dump. That's because they're communists who have no respect for property. That's because they're poor. And the reason is they have the wrong attitude. If they had faith in the capitalist system, they'd be off selling the junk at a flea market and turning an honest profit. And then this great land would be as clean as a hound's tooth. Except some nosy environmentalist would start moaning about cruelty to animals. Talk about a waste of energy. Instead of holding Earth Day rallies, maybe these tree huggers would be better off taking a one-way trip to the sun in a Mercury rocket made out of real mercury. At least that way they won't be polluting America with their nonsense anymore. And if they can't adapt to the harsh environment of the sun, then I guess the law of nature will have done its job just like it's supposed to. Anyway, if scientists are so smart, then how's come 21 million people don't listen to their radio show? It's because I'm right and they're wrong. They're always talking about their findings, but in the battle of wits, they're always losing to me. I'm not saying that I want everyone to live in polluted surroundings, even though my apartment is knee-deep in empty pizza boxes. But if some environmentalist wants to go in there with an astronaut suit and clean it up at a cost of billions, I'll be the first to say no thanks. I have a maid who is actually glad to have the chance to pick up my garbage and make a couple of bucks here and there. I don't even care if she nibbles at a few of the crusts in her off hours. Here's an example. I might eat more than my own share, but I amuse millions of people. Doesn't that count for something? And I don't make my living by moaning about how the sky is falling either. Fact is, even if the sky were to fall, there'd be plenty of hard-working Americans who would be glad of the opportunity to pick it up and put it back wherever it came from. Because we have the right to make the sky fall if it means we can hire some people and create new jobs in order to fix it. That's the beauty, my friends, of the free enterprise system. Chapter 16. What's with all this crime? What's with all this crime stuff anyway, huh? If criminals were more like me, there'd be no more crime. They'd be too fat to run and too big to hide. But never mind that. Let's talk about the Supreme Court. If they were the only criminals, we'd have it made. There's only 9 of them, and they all dress in black, so they'd be pretty easy to pick up in a police lineup. But even if they were caught committing a crime, some bleeding heart would say the pressure of their jobs drove them to commit their criminal acts. And the taxpayers would have to shell out the dough for them to appeal their case all the way to the Supreme Court. And then they'd rule themselves innocent and let themselves go scot-free. And we'd probably thank them for it.
maybe even give them a little party where they could dance on the Constitution while listening to Diana Ross and the Supremes. Well, just because I am heavyset and suffered from low self-esteem as a teenager did not mean I went around killing slender, attractive people. No, I went about it the legal way. I assassinated their characters over the airwaves. And nobody threw a party for me. They didn't even put me on a trading card, like they got that Jeffrey Dahmer and all them other murderers. For gosh sakes, why don't we let the cops enforce the death penalty? Now, I don't drive a car in the city, but if some crook smashes a windshield with a no radio sign, what could be better than to have a cop shoot the crook and put up a no criminal sign? And if some liberal bleeding heart videotapes this, the cop can shoot him and put up another sign that says no evidence. Pretty soon the cops will be plenty busy putting up signs that say no crime, and people can walk the streets in safety. Not that I walk anywhere, folks. When I have to cross the river, I hire a tugboat. It all comes down to this. People want peace and quiet, but they're willing to put up with a little noise, if it's the sound of policemen killing off the criminal element one by one. And I'm sure a lot of the good criminals would agree with me, if they weren't criminals and members of a special interest group to boot. Chapter 17. How's come girls don't like me? How's come girls don't like me? Those tampon-toting Amazons won't even give me the time of day. But I like girls. I like Minnie Mouse and Daisy Duck and even Olive Oyl, although, strictly speaking, she's a little bony for my taste. I like the cute way Betty Boop says boop boop a doop, and I even like Wendy the Good Little Witch, even though she's probably a secular humanist off in that forest, consorting with ghosts and devils. So, why all this hatred? I'm not a hater. They are. Those feminists. They hate all men. And there's a lot of me to hate. And it hurts. But I'm too big to hate. I'm too big to do pretty much anything. Maybe that's why I'm so shy in real life. Because I don't know how to talk to them. Or anybody. Unless I'm conducting the conversation. Not that I have a normal life. But I've already said too much. But I can say this much. Not all girls go for that feminism jazz. There's at least two that don't. I know this for a fact. I used to be married to them. So I have a lot to say on the subject. And I will. I didn't date much in high school. My radio show kept my hands occupied. But I still couldn't get away from feminists. Even in the backwater, jerkwater, or one-horse town, hick town I grew up in. Then I moved to McKeesport, Pennsylvania, the big city. And the woods were crawling with these man-eaters. They even got me in Dutch with my boss. Isn't that just like girls, to snitch on you? So here's my chance to get back at them. The earliest feminists were cave women. They didn't want men to hit them with clubs and drag them by their hair. And I agree with this. Who could blame them? Then they got these radical ideas and decided to cut their hair and demand to join men's clubs. And that's wrong. The girls were confused. And so am I. It's gotten so you don't even know which end is up, or which comes first, 6 or 9. So I moved to Kansas City. And the feminists ratted me out again. And a lot of men lost their jobs. Who can blame them if they're mad at girls? Who can blame girls if they're mad at feminists who aren't real girls at all? What kind of real girl is it, huh? Who doesn't want a man and if she does get pregnant by one, decides to have an abortion. If I ever managed to get somebody pregnant, I would say, fetus, do your stuff. A good many intellectuals agree with me on this, including Ronald Reagan. Because let's face it, the hand that rocks the cradle and all that jazz, a Disney movie, I think. But with all this welfare floating around, why should men bother buying a cradle when they can cash in their food stamps and purchase malt beverages?
And the baby can sleep on the floor for all they care. And it's all the fault of those man-hating feminists who say, let Uncle Sugar be the daddy and to hell with the father. I say, to hell with them. And that's where they all belong, because they've turned the world I grew up in upside down. They say women are better than us. And they are, unless they happen to be feminists. And I don't care how much they complain to my boss. I'll never back down on this issue, or any other on that matter. In fact, I have trouble backing out of anywhere. But I'll tell you what, if they call me on it face to face, I might bend a little, but not too much. The last time I tried bending a little, I popped all the buttons off on my shirt. That's where I wear these stylish sweaters now. Okay, so maybe I put women on a pedestal. But I have to, for their protection, because I haven't had sex in ages. Chapter 18. I am the world's biggest special interest group. I am the world's biggest special interest group. Let me explain that by saying that race relations in this country are lousy. I believe that race relations in this country will be enhanced by my presence. Why? It's simple, folks. Since I am the epitome of the frustrated, insensitive white man, I am therefore an appropriate target for the opprobrium of special interest minorities. Because I am the world's biggest special interest group. I am a minority of one. And I believe, deep in my unselfish soul, that all the special benefits should go to me, Lush Rambo. Because I'm sick of black agitators. They're everywhere. Why, just the other day I found one in my washing machine. Now, I've been given to understand that blacks don't like to be referred to as these people. Just to give them a fair shake, I promise in the future to refer to them as those people. Because those people can't get away with calling me a racist. They're the ones who use the word race, not me. I haven't been in a race since 1968. In fact, the last time I saw my feet was in 1969. Anyway, all this stuff about how black people discovered Columbus and built the pyramids is just hooey. What kind of job do you expect, those people to get when they believe that kind of bunk? Sure, slavery was bad, but I don't harp about how my ancestors were called kraut in Dutch when they first came here. No, my people tried their hardest to blend in with the scenery, usually by renting their backsides out as roadside billboards. That's what made this country great. People willing to endure all sorts of humiliation in order to earn a buck. I don't go around calling myself a calorically challenged individual of vast bulk. I'm an American. I'm as American as 10 apple pies, which is what I had last night as a little midnight snack. I'm as big as all America, though not quite as wide. I'm a well-rounded American, and I may have stopped growing up, but I'm still growing out. Every single day. Nobody taught me to overeat when I was in school, but somehow I managed to pick up the rudiments. In fact, I believe I ate them. There are plenty of things I never got the chance to eat, but you don't see me crying about it. I'm too busy worrying about my next little snack to worry about all the chow I could have scarfed down if only I had 4 hands. Because I believe in the American melting pot, especially if there's some tasty victuals in there for me. And I believe in assimilation, especially when it comes to assimilating all the toothsome morsels which come my way. And I'm not prejudiced. I'm not prejudiced against any ethnic group. I'm willing to sample any ethnic cuisine they put on my plate, even if it's still moving. And these days, you never know.
because I don't believe in alienation. I believe in being able to say, I ate enough for a nation. What about the issue of fairness? I believe that anyone who thinks I want to eat up all the food on earth is being totally unfair. I have a brother too. And my strong belief in family values would not permit me to gorge myself on all the grub I could shovel into my insatiable maw without at least giving him first crack at some of the goodies. That's the definition of brotherhood. And if I worried too much about what is fair, I'd probably waste away to a 190-pound weakling. And then where would we be? The fact is, folks, if a fat man climbs to the top of the heap, there's always going to be a few weaklings on the bottom who are going to say it isn't fair, if they can still breathe. If I'm on the top, that's my personal fulfillment of the American dream. And if you're being crushed beneath my weight, that's your nightmare, not mine. If you're miserable, it's not my fault. So don't tell your kids that fat people are wicked. And don't blame Columbus either, or his wife. They didn't write the Constitution, and neither did Indians or slaves. And neither did all those immigrants who fled their own squalid hellholes to come to this heaven on earth. And neither did school teachers. Once upon a time, I used to know who actually did write the Constitution, but I forgot. And who cares anyway? I'm rich. And I don't sweat the small stuff anymore. I eat it. This is called Chapter 19, another controversial chapter, entitled, Rodney King Was a Lousy Driver. Rodney King was and is a lousy driver. He drove a cheap Korean car. Is this news that the cops pulled him over? I guess so. But the inner cities are lousy places to live with a cheap government-built infrastructure which is crumbling. And anybody can come along with a cheap video camera and shoot 81 seconds of cheap footage with lousy audio, and what does that prove? That the government is motivated by racism? I guess the jury is still out on that one because the government isn't in jail yet. In fact, the bureaucracy is so bloated, there aren't enough jails to hold them all. And besides, the ACLU would probably have them out in 81 seconds flat. And the ACLU would probably get them $81 million in damages to boot. Even if the footage showed that the government lunged at the officers who came to arrest it. Even if the video turned out to be 4 minutes long instead of 81 seconds like the government-controlled media has implied. And what if the government decided to riot? Would there be people saying it was because of years of citizen oppression? What if the government decided to loot and tear down buildings? But they already do that, only it's called taxation and urban renewal. I think the government should act civilized. The government should get its own radio show and brag about itself all afternoon, every afternoon, then get on TV around about midnight and brag some more for half an hour every weekday night. Then people would know they mean business. I can't believe we let the government tell us what to do. They talk about the rule of law. Who makes these laws? The government. It's a franchise. It's a conspiracy. We actually reward them for telling us to do stuff we don't wanna. That's why the rule of law is a crime. And that's why law-abiding citizens are fed up. Of course, I'm fed up too, but that's just normal because I just had my supper. Let's talk about ways of fixing government.
but not by taxing us and stuff. Let's try summary execution of criminals, like they do in China. It works for them. Why not us? Actually, I'm trying to make a point here. And the point is how those people, you know the ones I mean, the ones who riot, those people don't know how good they have it. There's a lot of smart people who say they never had it so good. And who am I to disagree? Especially if they confirm my prejudices. Let me put it this way. Those people should get out of the black collars and into the white collars and the black robes, like Justice Thomas, and stop having so many babies, and stop breathing my oxygen, because I'm not sure there's enough to go around. And it's irresponsible of them to breathe up all the air. All they use it for is to shout slogans that I disagree with. But it's hard to be full of rage if you're blacking out for lack of air. They should stop demanding that we supply them with oxygen and go into business manufacturing it for themselves. And while they're at it, they can stop drinking our water. Maybe they can make their own and use it to put out some of the fires that they started with their rioting. I think you know who I mean. Instead of giving them money, which comes out of my pocket, maybe we could give them 40 acres and a mule. That's a good Republican solution from the 60s. Okay, maybe it's the 1860s. But it's an idea whose time has come. Besides, it's hard to burn a mule. And if you ever tried looting 40 acres of farmland, you know it's a tough job. Don't get me wrong, I don't like to see poverty. That's why I never go outside unless I have to. Maybe we could all learn from my upbringing. I was born in a log mansion. I had to walk 2 miles to get to the country club. And my family had to do without a 4-star live-in chef for many, many years. But I didn't steal anything, except maybe the spotlight. And I didn't kill anything, except a lot of time waiting for my lucky break. And now that I've got mine, I'm not going to let go of it for anything. And don't even think about trying to take it away from me. This is chapter 20, and it's called Stainhead a Liar. Stainhead's a liar. I mean Gorbachev. In Russian, his name means the evil one, and yet they worship him. And it's Reagan they should be on their knees to. And yet, Ted Kennedy won't even give Ronald Reagan a curtsy. Yet, Reagan's the guy that gave Stainhead the breeze. You think the Democrats could have made the Ruskies eat crow? Fat chance. Reagan scared them in the last October. I have proof, but you can't see it. So there. Our bombs were better than theirs. Their bombs were losers. Ours were winners. Our bombs scored touchdowns. Their bombs fumbled. We had good defense. They didn't even have an umpire. And now they have no empire. We win. They lose. They even admit that we won. Fair and square. Yet Stainhead gets all the prizes and his picture on Time magazine. And a whole bunch of money. Even though he's a liar. And a communist. And a terrorist. And worst of all, he let the Russian people starve. And now they're knocking on our door for forage. And that causes an empty feeling in the pit of my stomach. Because I like my steaks red. Communist blood red. I'm thinking of having one right now. Anyway, Stainhead's a commie and a liar. And he doesn't even run his own country anymore. In fact, the country he used to run isn't even a country anymore. So, the left is left behind, and the right is right ahead. And now that the murderous Soviets are gone, the peace-loving bombs of America have no more competition. And I say, 3 cheers for us. Chapter 21. Those homeless are just bums. Those homeless are just bums. Why? I even saw a homeless man teaching his dog to beg. It's a franchise! And the people who support the homeless are even worse. They're bums who have been to college. I believe we can solve the so-called crisis of the homeless by building heartless shelters, where the heartless can go to hide from the homeless. Anyway, look at the cowboys whose legends made this country great. You didn't hear them saying, homeless on the range. No, they took what they had and made do. They didn't have any lifted pinky finger pinkos telling them they should blame Ronald Reagan. I tell you folks, I don't know who's crazier. Those homeless people or the bleeding hearts who are out there stirring up trouble and telling them to complain. Most of them don't even pay taxes, so what do they know? Maybe we could give them jobs repossessing people's homes. Then, instead of being one paycheck away from the poorhouse, they can be one poorhouse away from their next paycheck. And they can feel good about themselves, maybe for the first time. And a lot of social workers would be out on the streets because their clients would have real jobs for a change instead of begging for spare change. Then maybe the social workers can pick up cans and bottles and sell them to supermarkets. Let's see them try to put a first month's deposit on a Manhattan apartment with the money they make from doing that. How do we solve this problem we have with the homeless, which I'm not even sure even exists? Well, let's go door to door and find out how many homeless people there really are. Also, let's find out how many people volunteer to be homeless and how many don't really care one way or the other. Also, let's find out which homeless people take too much medication and which homeless people need drugs, and introduce them to each other. Eliminate the middleman, because by now he's probably homeless too. Also, instead of having all these bums swiping cherry pies off the widow woman's windowsill, let's put them to work chopping wood and baling hay. Then, after they've worked up a hearty appetite, tell them you'll give them room and board in exchange for doing some of the chores that ain't been getting done since Pa took sick and died from overwork. That's how you get a job in this great country, by taking the place of some geezer who couldn't stand the gaff. Because if your own friends and family can't rustle up some kind of job for you, you're better off on the farm, where I don't have to smell you. Whatever you do, don't depend on liberals to help you. They like high unemployment and people starving on the streets because it gives them something to complain about. And because they hate the Republicans and they hate rich people, and they would rather eat Ma's homeless cherry pie than do something about it. Chapter 22. Hollywood is rotten. Hollywood is rotten. Hollywood stinks. They used to make good westerns and murder mysteries and cartoons and stuff, but now they spit on the flag and hawk on the Bill of Rights, and I can't even bring myself to mention what they want to use the Constitution for. They light their cigars with $100 bills when any fool can tell you that makes them taste bad. Yet they treat gangsters like businessmen and businessmen like gangsters, and they're losing money because they're so greedy and it serves them right. And besides, they haven't asked me to star in one of their pictures, and I've got a doozy. The Kate Smith story, starring me. Or the John Madden story, starring me. Or the Ted Baxter story, starring me. Or Son of Ronald Reagan, with me in the title role. Or the Jonathan Winters story, featuring me. Or What If Woody Allen Were Fat, starring me. Or What If Jack Parr Were Heavy, with me as the heavy. Or a remake of The Little Rascals, starring me as Spanky. Or a remake of The Man Who Fell to Earth, with me instead of David Bowie. Or Genghis Khan Returns, with me as Mr. Khan. Or a live-action version of Baby Huey, with me as the lead character. Or they could make any Orson Welles movie from a conservative point of view, starring me. Or here's an idea that can't miss. The Life and Times of Lush Rambo, starring Lush Rambo as himself. That would gross over $100,000, and I would only insist on taking half, since I would also write, produce, and direct this masterpiece. But no, Hollywood won't listen to my ideas, because it's crawling with egomaniacs. So if they lose money, it's no skin off my back, and I've got plenty of skin to spare, let me tell you. It's because they're greedy, and I don't want to be in a movie anyway. The stars are nuts, the directors are fruitcakes, the producers are half-baked, and all of a sudden, I'm very hungry. It's a crime the way these actors parrot liberal causes. Why can't they parrot conservative causes? Like all the truly responsible entertainers do, like Charlton Heston and Ronald Reagan. It's because there's an enormous black hole where their personalities should be. I don't have that problem. The only emptiness I ever feel is in my stomach. Did I mention that I feel a snack attack coming on? Anyway, actors shouldn't get involved with politics, unless they're Ronald Reagan. And it's a real pity, but of course, he can't run for a third term. Hey, did I tell you for my idea for a movie, Ronald Reagan Rides Again? Let's do lunch. I'm starving. Does pizza sound good? Chapter 21. No, I'm sorry, Chapter 23. Utopia? Not me. Utopia? Not me. I'm against it. All the time I was growing up in the 60s and early 70s, they were talking devil worship and blue jeans, and they always got real quiet when I lumbered into view, which was usually a half a mile off, and they never let me play in any reindeer games, but I don't care because I'll go down in history, because I may not be a red, but I have a red nose, probably from all that Crown Royal I slurped down, because coming up with all this stuff is hard because I hardly ever repeat myself. Hardly ever repeat myself. You know, folks, I never fit in much with that 70s crowd. The last time I tried to dress in white, they mistook me for a sailboat and tried to drop me in the Allegheny River. Only luckily, the winch snapped. You see, there is a God, and he looks out after his faithful. He knows I have nothing against religious worship, especially when it's directed towards me, which it often is. Anyway, all that utopia jazz is still around, and I'm not talking Todd Rundgren. I used to be a rock and roll DJ, so I can drop a musical reference every now and then, and it doesn't seem out of place or inappropriate because, as I said, I used to be a rock and roll DJ. No, I mean all that hippie stuff from the 1960s that's still on the menu, and you see it everywhere. At least if you sit around watching TV all day and listen to all that politically correct nonsense that I'm constantly harping against, instead of attacking racism, because my southern listeners might not like it. I think talking about stuff like girls and peace and good health is for sissies. I think only limp-wristed pantywaists worry about people going hungry and cruelty to animals. We can solve both those problems by eating those suffering animals and putting them out of their misery. That's always been my philosophy. Folks, I wouldn't even consider eating a poor, shivering, mangy old dog. But I might eat a fat young puppy after I knocked back a few stiff drinkies. I know about being poor. I had to drive a broken down 1969 Pontiac Le Mans that kept breaking down all the time. I lived in a basement apartment with no dishwasher. At one time, I was so impoverished, I actually had a TV set that only got 2 stations, and one of them was PBS. Now, I don't need a car because I take a taxi cab wherever I go. I don't need a dishwasher because I lick the plates clean and throw them in the trash. And I certainly don't have to watch PBS now that I've got my own TV show that I came up with the idea with after a few drinks of Crown Royal and scribbling on the backs of a couple of cocktail napkins. Back when I was poor, I used to drool over Penthouse. Now I live in a penthouse, but I still drool. Because the more things change, the more they remain the same. In fact, the more things change, the more I remain the same. Take it from me, folks. Being a member of the ruling class is as easy as 1, 2, 3 million. Sometimes, maybe I feel marginalized. True, in my case, the margin takes up most of the page, but that's the way I feel. But I don't believe in hand-wringing. Folks, I'll tell you the truth. I can't even get my 2 hands together. Some people listen to my show and say, I'm paranoid. I'll kill! My critics have accused me of an inner emptiness. Well, folks, there's a pizza, a steak, a hot dog, a box of popcorn, a corned beef sandwich, a salad bar, and a child's lemonade stand in my stomach that says they're liars. Some people say we should redistribute the wealth. If I could redistribute some of this spare tire of mine into my upper chest region, I'd be happy with that, for starters. Then maybe all the muscle men on the boardwalk might stop mistaking me for a beached whale. Anyway, the man from Utopia, this is a straw man that I'm constructing in order to shoot it full of holes. The man from Utopia says, or thinks anyway, that we can squander our way to riches by giving beggars a handout. Forgive me for suggesting that maybe we should all carry sharp swords like they do in the Middle East and offer them a hand off unless they stop asking for charity and start looking for a real job like the one I have. But the government wants them to stay poor because it's a known fact that these people, those people hardly ever vote Republican. If everyone voted Republican, we could all help others to help themselves. To help themselves to every tax break the ingenuity of man can devise, and a few more besides. The middle class shouldn't have to pay for the poor. But there's no way you're going to get the upper class to do it. Folks, let's face it, these people didn't get rich by letting people take their money away from them. Anyway, those pie-in-the-sky utopians hold the magic bullet of free enterprise in their hairy hands. But the tragedy is, they just can't get it through their heads. They just go along year after year, scheming and dreaming and talking their claptrap about everybody having a decent life. But let's face it, there's a bullet with their name on it, and it's been writing bad checks all over town, and we're the ones who end up paying for it all. Chapter 24. Big media isn't big enough for me. I believe that big media isn't big enough for me. In fact, the whole world is barely big enough for me. Although I love to gorge myself on caviar and steak, I must confess my one true real extravagance is riding in the cargo bay of chartered flights whenever I travel this great land of ours. Anyway, even though this book of mine has no footnotes or bibliography, I refer to the media quite a bit. But I'm still not done with them yet. The media is accountable to nobody. Neither am I, but that's beside the point. The media is irresponsible. Well, so am I, but that's beside the point. I always take great pains to document my whoppers, at least to my own satisfaction, but they don't, at least not to my satisfaction. Also, the thing about the media, I have a problem with their attitude. Instead of waiting on the public, they stand around in the alcove, smoking cigarettes and telling smutty jokes and writing their Pulitzer Prize acceptance speeches and bad-mouthing their bosses, and more often than not, the silverware is greasy and there's lipstick marks on the water glasses, and you can bet those smart Alecks will see a cold day in heck before they get a tip from yours truly. Especially since they all seem to be under the mistaken impression that their puny needs are more important than mine. I mean, folks, it's like pulling teeth just to get them to tell you the special of the day. You'd think they worked in some swanky gourmet restaurant with a rotating floor on top of some skyscraper instead of a flea-bitten, two-bit, run-of-the-mill, Herkimer-Jerkimer chop house where the maitre d' is a guy named Joe, and that's why they call it Chez Joe. Anyway, you'd think instead of working in some swanky posh place, like they don't, they work in some cheap place where they have to swat the vermin away every half hour on the hour. That's where the media works. And I'm sick of it. Anyway, if you ever had to deal with insolent help, you know exactly how I feel about the media. You just can't get good service nowadays. They all act like they're king of the castle instead of the boob who cleans the crocodile-infested moat. When are these megalomaniacs going to realize that I'm the hotshot who's going to put them all out of a job by the year 2000 with my talk radio empire that's growing every minute? Because I'm the kid who put salt in the ocean, and yet they have the nerve to say I'm bombastic. Just who do these sniveling pipsqueaks think they are? They say I have an unhealthy influence on the people of this country. They're just jealous because no matter where you go in the whole United States, you can always hear my show on the radio, whether you want to or not. They say I make conservatives look like clowns. How can I do that when I'm on the radio and they can't even see me? Yet another one of their unsubstantiated allegations, innuendos, slanders, and blatant falsehoods and lies. I don't have my own show on CNN. Yet. But until then, I'll just follow my instincts and troll for the lowest common denominator because the little fish are all up there on the surface, and I'm right there with them, every step of the way. Did I mention I can walk on water? As I said, my body is 45% fat.
Anyway, it looks like I have my network cut out for me, in a manner of speaking. All these disrespectful young whippersnappers in the journalism schools are unaware of one crucial fact. Truth is, there's a heck of a lot more money to be made in being a disrespectful old whippersnapper. But none of them realize this, and to tell you the truth, folks, that frightens me. Even over at Time magazine they've gone pinko. Henry Luce would roll over in his grave if he could see how far to the left they've gone. Maybe after some of the people who work there have a few children, they'll stop behaving like wild-eyed commie bomb throwers and start getting some of that old-time religion back again and start acting like dyed-in-the-wool fascists again. Because you see, it all comes down to this. 20 million Lush Rambo fans can't be wrong. Because my motto is, speak loudly and carry a big shtick. Chapter 25. What's the matter with God? We're okay. God himself invented the United States. Okay, maybe he wasn't there in person, but he had some boys on his staff who were. And a lot of Americans, the good ones anyway, know this for a fact. It's a pity that kids today can't have God in the classroom and instead have to worship him on the streets. It's all the fault of the Supreme Court, the ACLU, the liberals, and other filth. The Bill of Rights and the Ten Commandments are basically one and the same. That's why we should take the business of schooling out of the hands of ignorant educators and have smart businessmen teach the kids the kind of practical know-how it takes to get ahead in the world. Anyway, it seems to me that what the Founding Fathers wanted was freedom of religion, not freedom from religion. Or am I wrong here? I don't think so. Geometry was never my favorite subject in school, but that, my friends, is 360 degrees of difference. Fact is, the only religion big government wants us to worship is, you guessed it, folks, the religion of big government. You heard it here first. Why, it's enough to make the heads of the great presidents on Mount Rushmore hide their faces in shame. And every time I look at Ben Franklin on one of the $100 bills I carry around in my wallet, I wonder what he would say if he knew that hundreds of thousands of dollars are being spent to keep God out of our schools. And I'll bet Thomas Jefferson wouldn't give a plugged nickel like the one he's on for the educational system we have today. I do know that neither one of these fine, God-fearing Americans would cozy up to the faceless patronage leeches who want to erase the name of God from the tapestry of American history and replace it with Hitler, Stalin, and Franklin Roosevelt. I'll bet those founding fathers wouldn't give 2 cents to see one of those pencil-pushing drones as they legislate God out of existence. I'll bet those great Americans would be shocked right down to the buckles on their shoes to see those nameless political hacks take his name in vain. And I sure would like to be there to see the fireworks when our founding fathers rolled up their sleeves and took a slippery elm club to the backsides of those so-called government, so-called workers, and showed those parasitic hangers-on what a God-fearing American can do with a little bit of inspiration from the Almighty. But until that day, I'll be happy to do that job on their behalf. Because it's time we said no. No more Mr. Nice Guy. It's time we said more Mr. Tough Guy. Chapter 26. Mr. Republican, setting the woods on fire. Ronald Reagan was a great man, is a great man, because instead of boring us with intellectual hogwash, he told funny stories and sold the country on the idea of our own greatness, and that, to me, is optimism and salesmanship in action. So, why can't we give him his due? He's the man who told conservatives they weren't chumps or chimps, they were champs.
He told us folks on the right that it was good not to like free lunches and share alike, and the post office and the IRS and the Miranda warning and protest rally bums and flag burning refusenicks and commie loving peaceniks, with government hardly even giving us change back from our dollar and making it impossible to leave $1 million to our kids so they can afford to order room service. This country was all set to replace the stars and stripes with the hammer and sickle, until good old Ronnie stepped up to the plate and knocked creeping socialism clean out of the ballpark so we could concentrate on flexing our muscles in the bleachers of world opinion. And then, all of a sudden, when Reagan got to be president, we heard that sweet conservative music around the clock. But there were a few discordant notes from the tuneless liberals who couldn't stop their paranoid harping about how Reagan was to blame for everything. But they were wrong. They were the ones who were to blame for everything. So there. Thanks, Ronnie. Thanks for making it all possible. For making me possible. Chapter 27. The Washington Zoo. Washington is a zoo, and that means we should feed those animals maybe, but that doesn't give them the right to run our lives from behind their iron curtain of ignorance. No wonder there's all these people who think maybe we should have some sort of non-zoo kind of animal running the show for a while. Well, there was Jerry Brown, Mr. I am so in touch with myself, I've forgotten how to feel. Then there was good old Pat Buchanan, who gave that fake Nazi, David Duke, the old what for. He was a smart intellectual, not one of those stupid ones you hear about all the time. And then there's H. Ross Perot. Excuse me while I pat myself on the back for not being fooled by this man. Of course, my back is so big, it's divided into postal zones. This may take a minute. There. Perot is bad because first he said that he didn't want to play ball. Then he said he would only play if he could supply the balls. Then he decided he would take his balls and go home. Then he got back in the ball game. I'll say one thing for him. The whole time people were talking about the balls he had, he didn't even bat an eye. So what's all this mean? Bush sucked up to the liberals and it didn't work. And Perot may have had his own business, but when it came to running for president, he didn't have any business being in the race. Why? Because big business is founded on individual enterprise, and big government sucks individual enterprise dry and discards the empty husks by the roadside, where ingenious entrepreneurs like me can sell it at a flea market and turn a very tidy profit. Chapter 28. Hooray for Lush Rambo. Hoo boy, this thing is finally over. Let me say that you should fight your own battles by doing what I say. And if you don't do what I say, then see what happens. And don't blame your tough luck on me. But if you do what I say, remember this. Liberals smell bad, plus most of them have no money because they don't have real jobs like you or me, especially me. They get ahead only by stirring up trouble and poking their noses where they don't belong. I'm sure glad I don't live in their neighborhood. Actually, I would be breaking the law if I did live in their neighborhood, unless their neighborhood were zoned for heavy industry, which they aren't, because instead of building up their industrial base, they've been giving their money to poor people. Think about this for a minute. They give their money to poor people who don't know what to do with money, and that's why they're poor. And any fool could see that, except a liberal. Why, if these kids today in their godless schools could only listen to my show every afternoon for 9 months, they would learn a very valuable lesson. How to be a big shot by protesting you're nothing else but. No wonder the whining liberal crowd hates me. They're just like communists, except newspapers off in Russia don't make any money. And the communist media in this country does. Somehow. But not for long. Sponsors are flocking to me. Why me? I'm just an ordinary guy. But I'm also much, much more. I am an entertainer, a celebrity, a self-designated living legend, a ceremonial effigy, a showman, a shayman, and a larger-than-life replica of your own aspirations to fame. And I'm not whining. I'm winning. I've got my own show. And I'll show them all. I'll show them all. I'll show them all. Funding for the Lush Rambo show, The Way Things Ain't, was provided by a very generous grant by the Middle East Cafe at 472 Mass Avenue, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Tune in next week for the follow-up to this Lush Rambo presentation entitled, So You Didn't Listen. You are tuned to Cambridge Community Television, Channel 66. Cafe Cabaret is a program which is broadcast every Thursday at 9 o'clock p.m. on Channel 66 on Cambridge Community Television. Thank you very much, and good night. Good night.